What is it that truly makes a man? Is it his strength of mind and body? Is it his willpower, his lineage, his ability to attract people of his preferred gender? Depending on the context, it could be any of these things. But to me, what truly makes a man is his actions, because at his core, a man is his choices and what he chooses to do with everything that he's given. And the character, Superman, was supposed to embody this ideal. But how does the most recent cinematic interpretation of this character portray this message to a new generation? This video aims to clearly define authentic, genuine masculinity, and how James Gunn's Superman from the 2025 film is the perfect example of that. As a result, this video will contain spoilers for the following. And to start this video off, I want to define what masculinity is. Masculinity is an idea, and in the simplest terms, it's the idea of what a man ought to be. It's a set of societal expectations that people of said society assign to those of the male gender. People think that a person's masculinity can be measured by a lot of things, their physical strength, or even something as pointless as whether or not you know how to drive a manual. But I don't believe that masculinity can be accurately measured by any of these things. Instead, to me, the measure of a man is his integrity, his self-discipline, and perhaps most importantly, his self-awareness. And in the 2025 film directed by James Gunn, Superman exhibits all three to a level that, quite honestly, should be praised and idealized by all men. And let's start with Superman's integrity. A man's values should be his guiding principles. While a man's choices and actions are what ultimately define him, it is his values that inform these decisions. And a man's integrity is determined by the presence of these values, how morally sound these values are, and how incorruptible these are to him. A man of integrity is one who is morally sound, and whose values cannot be easily shaken by external factors. If a man's beliefs can be swayed merely by the prospect of power, influence, or money, then they are a man of no integrity, which some may view as not a man at all. To cite a media example, in the hit Broadway show Hamilton, Aaron Burr is characterized as an opportunist. He wanted to be in a position of power, but also feared political failure because of the shame that it would bring to his family name. Thus, Burr was patient but unprincipled, waiting to see which political stance would be popular and go wherever the grass was greener to maximize his chances of success. Or, in modern terms, he was portrayed as a grifter. Thus, in the play, he was characterized as someone who, for the most part, didn't stand for any kind of political ideology. He swapped parties, was hesitant to back the Constitution, and ultimately lost the presidential election because he was seen as a man of no conviction and unfit to lead a young America. But even if Burr's character ultimately didn't get what he wanted, the truth is that having flexible morals is living an easy life. Living entirely based on self-interest and caring not for so-called trivial things like the greater good is a free ticket to power through influence or money or both. It's why many people in power, such as politicians and billionaires, are portrayed as cold-blooded and ruthless because, as the saying goes, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. A good example is Zuckerberg's characterization in The Social Network. To build what would become an empire, he would go on to betray his best friend, Eduardo. That's why we love characters with such uncompromising moral codes, like Spider-Man, Batman, and of course, Superman. These characters show that being good, even in a world that opposes it, never really goes out of style. And it's also fun to see them match up against enemies who have no such restrictions, and then witness how they beat them despite the burden of morality. For example, in the 2025 film, Superman has to fight a giant monster. He doesn't know anything about it, but he understands one thing: it's alive. Yes, it may be rampaging across Metropolis and endangering its citizens, but it's still a living, breathing creature. But then the Justice Gang appears, and then they begin fighting the monster with reckless abandon, not only attempting to use lethal force against it, but also fighting without consideration for their surroundings. But Superman is disgruntled by this. We, the audience, know that the monster was released by Lex Luthor's goons, but Superman doesn't. For all he knows, it could be lost and afraid and needs to be studied and understood. But he's scoffed at by Mr. Terrific when he suggests that a non-lethal approach should be considered. And this is where we see Superman's integrity shine. At his core, he is a character that values all forms of life, and Gunn makes it a point to show that in this scene. While the Justice Gang is focused on beating the monster in combat, Superman is doing what a hero should do. He's saving lives, evacuating the area. At one point, he even rescues a squirrel, showing that no form of life is beneath him. It would be easier for Superman to just eliminate the threat, but that's not what makes him a better man. It's his uncompromising prioritization of the greater good over what's easy, even when it's the undoubtedly harder option. In fact, one of my favorite parts of this scene is that when the monster started to breathe fire and Superman realized it was putting the citizens in danger, he flew into the sky, where the monster's fire breath would cause the least amount of collateral damage. His priority isn't victory, it's always keeping as many people alive as possible, and I love that. And his valuing of life comes through so much in the film. When Metamorpho stopped channeling kryptonite, Supes could have just left him in the Pocket Universe, but he kept his word and saved his son. And when he exits, his immediate thought is to try to save everyone else who was left behind. This is how Superman shows his moral integrity, and he shows us how we should treat and think of our fellow man. But to do the right thing, even when it's most difficult, isn't just a signifier of integrity, but also of self-discipline, the second core value that the ideal man should have. And this is something that can be shown in so many ways. Discipline can show itself in composure, in a man's ability to prevent their emotions from overcoming them, even in the face of adversity. In the movie, when Superman was face to face with a black hole, his entire existence was about to end, and he was being pulled towards his demise. But Superman remained composed. He didn't panic or succumb to fear, nor did he succumb to self-doubt and accept his death. His composure allowed him to think out of the box and use his ice breath of all things to help escape the situation. When face to face with impending doom, a lesser man would have accepted his mortality, but not Supes. Discipline can also manifest through restraint, to only use violence as a final option when all other means have been exhausted. When Superman first barges into Lex's office after his fortress gets raided, his robots massacred, and Krypto seemingly nowhere to be found, all signs point to Lex as the guilty party, and Superman is furious. But before this scene, we already know how powerful Superman can be. He's gone toe-to-toe with a kaiju, and if the opening title sequence is to be believed, he's supposed to be one of the most powerful meta beings in existence. And while Lex has his money, his army, his goons, and all the resources at his disposal, he's still just a man. Superman could have very easily ended his life then and there, but he didn't. He understood that being primitive, giving in to his rage, and taking his anger out on Lex would not make him better off. Despite his fury, Superman demonstrates self-control and restraint. And right now, I think this is an incredibly timely portrayal of self-discipline as a masculine value. We live in a period where being rude and disrespectful of our fellow man is easily accepted. Being unhinged or based or crashing out is praised and worth millions of views. We have people who applaud those who are openly hateful and spread harmful rhetoric that does nothing but oppress others. In this day and age, it can feel like respecting other people, especially those who are different from us, is a lost art. But Superman shows discipline by never compromising on his value of human life, even when the lives he saves are throwing bottles at him, calling for his arrest, and calling him things like super shit. And when the people he protected called for his head, opposed him at every opportunity, he didn't antagonize them. And he definitely doesn't laser someone to death in front of a crowd of people, nor snap a dude's neck and show no remorse afterwards. And as I mentioned earlier, discipline can also be choosing to do the right thing even when it's difficult. Discipline is showing up to class or to work even when you just want to bail. It's choosing to finish your workout even on a lazy day. It's staying true to your diet when there's a cake right in front of you. It's doing what you should instead of what's easy. And on the days when you do give in because momentary lapses in judgment and moments of weakness do happen, it's about getting right back on track. Which brings me to the final masculine ideal that Superman exhibits in the film, which is self-awareness. James Gunn's Superman is one that really hammers home the point that he's human. The first time we even see him, the very first trailer of the film and its opening scene, we see a Superman that's defeated. See, one of the biggest reasons that Superman doesn't appeal to people is that they believe that he's boring. They believe he's invulnerable, he's godlike, and that he should just be able to breeze through any fight. But some of Superman's best stories are those where he barely gets out alive. In fact, one of the most iconic comic book covers of all time was for a story literally titled The Death of Superman. It's also pretty well documented that he has an established weakness. Heck, the term kryptonite has become so iconic that it's now a synonym for weakness. If you look beyond the surface level, you would understand that as powerful as he is far from invulnerable. And he also isn't above needing help. He needs the Justice Gang to stop a nation from being invaded because he can't be at two places at once. He needs Crypto to take out Lex's camera drones. He needs Lois and the Daily Planet crew to ultimately take down Lex. And he needs the combined efforts of the people mentioned for him to escape the pocket dimension. What makes this Superman interesting, and a big reason why this iteration of the character is such a refreshing take, is that he isn't unbreakable. He has weaknesses, he has lapses in judgment, he's far from perfect. Early on in the film, Lois even calls him out for referring to himself in third person, but he acknowledges that and grows from it. He's self-aware enough to be humble and acknowledge his humanity. He knows that he's not perfect and that he makes mistakes, but he doesn't weaponize his vulnerability. Despite his humanity, he still holds himself to a higher standard because he knows he's capable of being better. He acknowledges that he wouldn't be who he is without the people who raised him and the people around him, and I think that's the most manly thing in the whole goddamn movie. Because real masculinity isn't about being rigid and stubborn on a stance, asserting your view as the objectively correct one and refusing to grow from there, but that's where a lot of people get it wrong. In the film, Superman's arc is about accepting that his Kryptonian parents, whom he had placed on a pedestal, weren't perfect, and it ends with him embracing his humanity and growing past the idea that one's destiny is predetermined. And what ultimately gives him peace isn't a training montage or a massive fight scene, but a heartfelt conversation with someone who knows better. If Superman, who is supposed to be the best of us, is capable of self-reflection, accepting his flaws, working on them, and becoming a better person out of it, then why shouldn't we be? What excuse do we have to not examine our own consciousness and check if what we believe is right is truly morally just? There's nothing wrong with admitting fault, weakness, and accepting that you've got something to work on. Real men know their limits and work to surpass them. Because authentic, true masculinity isn't loud, arrogant, stubborn, and aggressive. It's quiet and humble because it speaks for itself. And what really hammers this point home is that Superman's enemy, his foil, his polar opposite, Lex Luthor, is the complete antithesis of everything I've said. Lex lacks integrity. That's why he's willing to make a deal with a despot for partial ownership of a country. It's why he's willing to invent a pocket dimension despite the humanitarian risks and fills it with people who ultimately shouldn't even belong there. It's why he murders an innocent man whose biggest sin in his eyes was showing his enemy just a bit of kindness. And it's why he's willing to sacrifice Metropolis in a fit of rage. He lacks discipline and temperament. His downfall is ultimately brought about by him not treating his girlfriend with respect. He's so blinded by his hubris and hatred that he doesn't account for the possibility that Superman might call in external factors to aid him, like Terrific or Crypto. He's so obsessed with Superman that he's unable to see the bigger picture. And that just shows that Lex, for all his intelligence and scheming, lacks self-awareness. While he does have a big speech about how he understands that he's a narcissist and that his massive ego is a weakness, he ultimately makes no move to overcome it and grow as a person. And that ego ended up bringing his downfall. He thought he could get away with everything just because he's rich and powerful, but in the end, he was undone by his own mistakes. Just being aware of your weaknesses and shortcomings as a person doesn't make you any better than anyone else, because when you know that you could be making better choices but you consciously choose to not do so, you are willfully ignoring the chance to be the best version of yourself. And because he's the ideal image of modern day masculinity, this is what this version of Superman inspires people to be. I don't think James Gunn's goal with his character was just to kickstart a multi-billion-dollar cinematic universe. I think he was also trying to create the ideal image of masculinity for the modern world. Supes is supposed to inspire us to go beyond ourselves, and to be better than what we think we are, and to look up and see what we can become. If we can just choose to be better the moment we get out of bed. Corin Sweat's Superman is one that inspires instead of striking fear, one that spreads hope and not hate. This version of Superman reminds us why this character is so influential and has lasted for decades. He sets the blueprint for what all men should aspire to be like. And speaking of likes, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button. Let me know your thoughts down below and subscribe for more content like this. Consider becoming a channel member. Channel members get their names posted on every video as a shout out, and you can even get videos just like this one released 2 days early. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.